in case anybody else, before we start the recording, was there anybody else that had a burning word for Ben or for Empower Aging? Go ahead. Okay. Well, if that's the case, then all the details have been put in the chat box, or you can continue. As I say, don't stop listening to the Lord, because my voice will drone on, okay? But the important thing is that you hear from God. This is one of the big differences between pagan religions, the heathen, and Christians. And this is exactly how the war on pagan practices was won. It was through listening to the voice of the Holy Spirit that spoke to, at first, to kings and priests and prophets, but then he began to speak to leaders and bishops and pastors and shepherds. And then now in the last days, he's speaking directly to hearts and minds without any intermediary. Can you see the difference? All right. Before, in order to get to God, you had to be a scholar, you had to learn Latin and Greek and so on and so forth. And then you could hear from God. But now every man sits under his own or her own fig tree or vine tree and can hear from God directly. Okay, so I want to reiterate, even though we're switching gears, we are going to continue to be in the receiving mode, and God is going to be speaking to you. All right. Now, last year we began a series on the 7 churches, and we started with a very introductory session on the 7 churches and looking how each one of them has a modal characteristics. And we noted the names of the 7 churches: Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum or Pergamos, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, Laodicea. This is the order that we are given in Revelation chapter 2 and 3. Why are we studying this? Is because these are the last day churches before the destruction of the temple at Jerusalem and the sending forth of the Jewish Messianic leaders and disciples across the known world, across the Mediterranean, and that it was also so it was a very end time situation. All right. Now, when we come to the end times church today, what is the war on the saints? What we're picking up on this series on the war on saints, and we're going through the different churches. And we stopped at Sardis, and we may have to go back to that next week because we may not have time. But I did find a passage that really kind of sums up what I want to say about Sardis. And we'll go to the Colossians 3, verses 5 to 9 in the interlinear in just a moment. But I just wanted you to see the overview of the 7, and I've numbered them and colored them here. So let me know if you have trouble seeing it. Can everybody see the screen? There are 7 different colors, all right? Red, black, blue, orange, green, pink. Okay, those 7 words in Greek. Idolatria, orge, thumon, kakian, blasphemia, iskrologian. And then the last one is palaion anthropon. It's an old man, okay? And his praxis. All right, pink, in pink. We came at it from the angle of modalities, the 7 archetypes, biblical archetypes of man. But in the case of archetypes, you can redeem. There's a part of us that can be redeemed, but there's a part of us that must die. Okay, and that's, so let me just read it to you. Therefore, put to death your members which are on earth: fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil. Some say evil desire, but I've broken it up: evil and desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. Verse 6. Because of these things, the wrath of God is coming upon the sons of disobedience, the sons of disobedience, in which you yourselves once walked when you lived in them. Take note, I have enumerated A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all right? And with a letter, with number 1 in front of them. These are the 7 aspects of idolatry. This is what idolatry is. Okay, idolatry is not just sticks and bowing before a porcelain god or attending some festival. Idolatry at its very heart is defined in this way. Okay, number 1A, take a look. 1A, fornication. Number 1B, uncleanness. 1C, passion, unredeemed passion. 1D, evil. 1E, desire. 1F, covetousness. And 1G is disobedience. Okay? So let me read that again, because he says all of these 7 things: fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil, desires, covetousness, disobedience, all of this, he says, is idolatry. It's the definition of idolatry. Okay, once more, he says, therefore put to death nekrao. You can see the word necrology or necromancy. Necro has something to do with death. Therefore, put to death your members which are on the earth: fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil, desire, covetousness, which is idolatry. Because of these things, the wrath of God is coming upon the sons of disobedience, in which you yourselves once walked when you lived in them. Okay, so he's not talking about your neighbor. He's talking about you, me, myself, and I. That is in a state of wrath. That means unless something happens, I am, number 1, I am deemed as a son of disobedience. Son of disobedience. And number 2, as a son of disobedience, the wrath of God, I'm a target for God's wrath. Okay. Then he goes on and take note, he says, put to death, nekrao. When you say put to death your members which are on the earth, if this was in secular literature, what would you think of? Put to death your members which are on the earth. What if I were to say, put to death the members that are in Lorong 13? What comes into your mind there? Right? That means execute, terminate. That means there is nothing you can do to redeem idolatry. It must go. It must be evicted from the property. Right? It is like a condition that is so serious that has to be dealt with. It is something that's so serious that you cannot redeem it. It must go, or else it will take you with it. It will sweep you away into wrath. All right. So this is the key. Put to death, number one, fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil, desire, covetousness, disobedience. This is the classical description of idolatry. Idolatry has nothing to do with porcelain statues or, that you kiss the feet, that sort of thing. It has nothing to do with temples. It has nothing to do with joss sticks, that sort of thing. All right. At the heart of idolatry are these 7 things: fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil, desire, covetousness, disobedience. Anytime we touch any of this, none of them can be redeemed. Okay? Next, he goes on. Idolatry is only one of seven traits of what he calls later on in verse 9, Palaion Anthropon, or in pink, the old man and his practices or habits. Okay, the old man. This old man, your past life, is under threat, not by Satan, but by God, under threat from God. That old man has to be renewed because, as you can see in verse 11, that old man is barbaros. Can you see there in verse 11? Where there is neither Greek nor Jew, circumcised nor uncircumcised, barbarian. And then he goes on and says, Scythian. Now, I looked up this morning, what is a Scythian? And he said it is an inhabitant of Scythia. It is the wildest of barbarians. And then when you look at where is Scythia today, it is modern Russia. Now, I don't want to get political, but I'm just taking note that the wildest part of the Roman Empire, mentioned by Paul, the writer of Colossians, in chapter 3, verse 11, he mentions not only barbarian, but he mentions a particular type of barbarian that is most wild and uncontrollable. And that he calls it by name. And today, that region, that whole region, is modern day Russia. So you can see the work of the gospel has progressed to a certain extent because most of Russia, Ukraine is Christian in name. And this is true. Let's not point fingers at any country here. It is true of the West, and it is true of Christianity. In name, it is a disciple. But if this idolatry is allowed to remain, then it too will be a target. It will fall under the judgment of God. Okay, so idolatry in purple there corresponds to the sin of the eye, the eyes. All right. Next, you have in verse 8, in red is the sin of the heart. These are heart sins. It's orge. But now you yourselves are to put off all these things. And listen, if there's anybody, I know Ignatius is on the line, you haven't been baptized yet. This is what you need to take note of, why you need to be baptized. It is to demonstrate to the angels, because the angels are under command to destroy people, to destroy all anti-God, anti-gospel elements. So when you're baptized, you're declaring whose side you are on. You're declaring your war on paganism. It's a war on all seven spirits, all right? It's not just paganism, but this is a definition of paganism now. Number one, idolatry in purple. Number two, anger in red. This is a sin of the heart. And then number three, thumon is wrath. Okay, thumon is the sin of leadership. Okay, let me just finish this section, and then Albert, I get to your question. Thumon is the sin of leader, the head. It's wrath. Okay, only God knows how to control his anger, his wrath, not anger, but the wrath. He is the leader. He is Lord. And then number four, in blue, is kakian, is malice. Malice comes to the issue of the hand that throws the spear, the grenade, or pushes the nuclear button. With malice and with executes with the hand, that's a sin of the hand. In other words, that's war. Okay, so kakian is war, it's malice. Then next one, number 5, is in orange. That's the sin of the ear, and that is going to teach the nations how to, instead of repenting, it's going to go deeper, how to teach you to go deeper into false, into everything false and everything pagan. Then number 6 is in green, aiskologian, is filthy language. This is the sin of the mouth. Okay, this is the sin of the mouth that speaks words that are not of God. They are not echoing the word of God. And then, so you have, including idolatry, that's 7 altogether. So how do we know what is the old man? Well, the old man and his practices, in pink there, in verse 9, end of verse 9, is comprised of these 7 things. Number 1, idolatry. Number 2, anger. Number 3, wrath. Number 4, malice. Number 5, blasphemy. Number 6, filthy language, right? And he says, do not lie to one another. Okay, there's one more here. Do not lie to one another. So all 7 of this is the target for the gospel and the cleansing and the river of God. When the when you bring your old man to Christ in baptism and on a daily basis, when we practice the listening room, when we practice renewing of the mind, right? The mind might be old, but it can have fresh thoughts. It can have God's thoughts. So age does not always equal wisdom, unless the old man is renewed. Okay, he goes on, he says in verse 10, and have put on the new man, who is renewed in knowledge according to the image of him who created him. There is neither Greek nor Jew, circumcised nor uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave nor free, but Christ is all and in all. So just wanted to bring this and this idea that the river of God is flowing right the way through to cleanse. Okay, that's about all the time we have for this section. I will continue with Sardis tomorrow, but we